Hello, I'm Molly Spearman, South Carolina State Superintendent of Education. There is no issue more important than the safety and well-being of our students. As teachers and administrators, it is imperative that we remain ever vigilant and report any suspicious activity. The video that you're about to watch will provide you with guidance and scenarios that will assist you in recognizing and responding to behaviors or communications which may indicate potentially dangerous actions.
A student approaches you and privately tells you that another student had jokingly said that he is going to blow up the school cafeteria. The student tells you that he is fairly certain that the other youth was only joking and that he does not believe that the student is dangerous. He tells you that he is only reporting the conversation because he had seen information on the news about a student who made explosive devices before carrying out a shooting at a school in Oregon.
Knowing what to do in situations like this could possibly make the difference between an averted attack and a tragedy. No one can assure the safety of all students and school employees against school violence, and there are no guarantees that any combination of preventive measures will be 100% reliable in preventing acts of violence. However, there are approaches that can significantly reduce the risk of attacks. Research indicates that factors such as school climate, informed educators, and clearly defined threat assessment protocols could possibly reduce the number of instances where planned attacks are carried out in schools.
Active assailants frequently find ways to carry out attacks in spite of the presence of metal detectors, ballistic-resistant glass, and other security equipment. As a result, school personnel seeking more reliable violence prevention or mitigation strategies must also pay close attention to the overall school climate.
School climate refers to how comfortable, welcomed, and connected students and staff feel in their school. It can be dramatically affected by how people treat each other, the efforts students and school officials make to create better connectivity, and the physical appearance of the school.
So, what are some of the characteristics of a positive school climate? Alert and properly trained school employees. Effective communications between students and staff. A coordinated approach to evaluating individuals who exhibit concerning behaviors or make potentially threatening communications. Ongoing collaboration between school administrators, staff, mental health professionals, and law enforcement personnel, and logical school security measures that have been thoughtfully developed and are consistently implemented with a high degree of fidelity. Creating and maintaining positive school climate can help reduce the risk of school violence.
In addition to understanding the importance of school climate in reducing violent attacks, school personnel should know that there is no reliable profile of a school shooter. While we often see references to stereotypical descriptors of students who carry out active assailant attacks at schools, extensive research by the United States Secret Service and the United States Department of Education has determined that there is no reliable profile of people who carry out these attacks.
In other words, attackers have sometimes been more different from one another than they are alike. Therefore, attempting to categorize students as being more or less likely to pose a danger based on physical attributes, family income levels, popularity, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and other factors common to many students is unreliable.
So what can we do? By recognizing early and imminent warning signs of potentially destructive youth behavior and, subsequently, implementing appropriate intervention measures, educators might be able to help reduce the risk of school violence overall, as well as helping to increase the probability that planned violent attacks will be successfully prevented.
Early and imminent warning signs identify behaviors that indicate that students who exhibit them could have an increased risk of creating situations that will result in negative outcomes. However, the presence of warning signs does not automatically indicate that a student has an increased risk of committing violence.
Early warning signs of destructive youth behaviors, which include the following, should be viewed primarily as indicators that a student may need help. Social withdrawal, excessive feelings of isolation and rejection, feeling of being picked on or persecuted, being a victim of violence, low school interest and poor academics, expressions of violence in writings or video projects, uncontrolled anger, intolerance for differences and prejudice, patterns of impulsive and chronic hitting, intimidating and bullying behaviors, history of discipline problems, drug and alcohol use, history of violent and aggressive behavior, affiliation with gangs, inappropriate access to, possession, and use of firearms and other weapons, threats of violence.
Imminent warning signs, on the other hand, indicate a higher degree of risk and the need for even more rapid or immediate intervention. Serious violent fighting with peers and family, severe destruction of property, severe rage for seemingly minor reasons, detailed threats of lethal violence, unlawful possession or use of weapons, self-injurious behaviors or threats or attempts at suicide, angry outbursts, excessive fighting and bullying, cruelty to animals, fire setting, frequent behavior problems at school or in the community, alcohol and drug abuse.
Viewing early and imminent warning signs in proper context with a focus on looking for patterns of multiple warning signs as indicators of the potential for increased risk of negative outcomes can be important.
Furthermore, consideration of overall context can indicate that some warning signs may be early for some students, while these same signs considered in context for a different student should be viewed as imminent. For example, a student who exhibits a history of violent and aggressive behavior, who is known to be a gang member, and who has been caught with a handgun should, perhaps, be viewed differently from a student who has exhibited violent and aggressive behavior on rare occasions. The context, number, and combination of early and imminent warning signs can help school officials better gauge the level of risk and determine more effective intervention strategies.
Being aware of early and imminent warning signs of destructive youth behavior can help school employees recognize indicators that students are at increased risk of negative outcomes. These observations can, in some cases, indicate that a student threat assessment is warranted.
A key philosophy for an effective violence prevention approach involves a commitment to avoid causing harm. Setting out to do no harm means that school personnel avoid emotive, reactionary, biased, and fear-based approaches when attempting to determine whether or not a particular student is at risk of inflicting violence on himself and others.
A clearly defined student threat assessment and management process is a critical part of the do no harm philosophy. Such a process includes, but is not limited to, the following components: formal written procedures, training for personnel who perform assessments, a screening mechanism to determine what level of assessment is called for when concerns are reported, the use of a standardized, written assessment tool, the use of a multidisciplinary threat assessment team, which includes an administrator, a mental health professional, and a law enforcement officer, a single point of contact at the school and district level, a second review of the initial assessment, safety awareness training for students, school staff, and parents, a focus on determining whether an individual actually poses a threat rather than an emphasis on determining whether or not they communicated a threat.
Additionally, the United States Secret Service and United States Department of Education recommend that student threat assessment inquiries include attempts to answer 11 important questions. What are the student's goals and motives? Has the student communicated or suggested an intent to attack? Has the student shown inappropriate interest in any of the following: school attacks or attackers, weapons, incidents of mass violence? Has the student engaged in attack-related behavior? Does the student have the capability to carry out an act of targeted violence? Is the student experiencing hopelessness, desperation, and/or despair? Does the student have a trusting relationship with at least one responsible adult? Does the student see violence as an acceptable or desirable or the only way to solve a problem? Is the student's conversation and story consistent with his or her actions? Are other people concerned about the student's potential for violence? What circumstances might affect the likelihood of an attack?
There are a number of student threat assessment processes. so educators should contact their administrators if they have questions. Regardless of the selected process, the most robust student threat assessment and management process is only as effective as the fidelity of its implementation.
Let's review a scenario from an event in a district that had established above-average threat assessment processes at the time of the event to illustrate how important implementing and maintaining the fidelity of the student threat assessment process is for all schools.
A high school student who vocally and clearly threatened to kill a school employee was reported to school administrators. The student, an intelligent and persuasive Eagle Scout, was not deemed to be dangerous when a threat assessment was conducted. The target of the threat requested that the school's assigned deputy sheriff investigate the incident. The deputy sheriff informed the staff member that he would file a report in case anything happened, but failed to open an investigation and did not interview the student. Similarly, a deputy sheriff from another county likewise failed to properly investigate a report that the same student had left a voicemail in which he threatened to kill a middle school student in his jurisdiction. The school district referred the student of concern to his parents, who took the student to see 2 different community mental health providers. Several months later, the student carried out an active assailant attack at his school and committed suicide. The attacker's diary contained references by the student about how he had persuaded a mental health professional that he was not dangerous. Experts who were brought in by the district to evaluate the situation determined that while the district had a viable student threat assessment process, the process was not followed. In addition, evaluators determined that mental health staffing was not adequate and that district and law enforcement personnel had not properly evaluated the risk the student posed in a multidisciplinary manner. Evaluators were concerned that the bias relating to the student's high levels of personal achievement, combined with his persuasiveness, may have contributed to the failure of multiple adults from a variety of organizations to properly recognize the potential for risk. This attack occurred in a high-performing school and in a district which had implemented many positive student threat assessment and management processes. Post-incident reviews indicated that the district personnel did not follow established practice. The district and sheriff's department have made significant enhancements to their staffing and student threat assessment and management processes and are now frequently utilized as a model program.
This scenario shows that even above-average student threat assessment and management processes can be ineffective if established procedures are not followed consistently.
Due to the nature of the topics we've addressed, this discussion is unpleasant and can cause fear and anxiety if not considered in proper context. We urge educators to remember that as a result of positive school climate, informed educators, and clearly defined threat assessment protocols, many imminent active assailant events have been successfully averted.
Thank you for watching. I hope you will take this information seriously and use it to make better informed decisions about the behavior of students in your classroom and in your school. By working together, we can ensure that every student and educator has a safe learning environment, producing even better schools and brighter futures.